Do it live! I feel like that's like one of those things you have to do at least once. It's like, we're just gonna do it live!
We're going live! This is it! Oh my goodness. Okay, let's see if I got it squared up. I think I got it.
All squared.
All square. All square. Okay.
Man.
Look at that.
Back again.
Just, yep. Back at it.
It feels, since we had the break for the semester, we still had podcast release, but we haven't done a podcast in a month. True.
It's been a minute.
Yeah,
it feels like it's been a minute.
Just about a month, I think. Just over a month. So,
but we released kind of Pointman news, if you will. So we took a break from the podcast.
Yep.
From this part of the podcast for a month. The reason we did that was because of the Pointman semester, physical semester. We talked about Moses, which we'll talk about more in a minute. We just concluded that. Was that last week? The week
yep, last Wednesday.
Week. Last Wednesday, Ian wrapped us up. His message is going to be dropping soon.
Yep.
Or it may have already dropped by the time this recording drops.
Yeah.
It may have already dropped.
Be a race for which one gets the first YouTube upload.
Right. Drop them down. Right, exactly. And so that may drop and have Ian out there. And then we have a Pointman meetup coming up.
Yep.
So on the 21st, the 21st, we'll do a big catfish fry at that church Cabot. You can sign up for that at that.church/Pointman website. You can sign up on there and kind of go from there. So what if we dive into kind of the semester a little bit? Let's talk about Moses. We're going to do a research team. So we got a group of guys who did some research on Moses, the first half of his life. Moses' life is divided in kind of 3 parts. And it's the first part. We have a group of guys that are coming. We'll be doing a show with them soon. But we're just going to kind of do a brief overview and kind of 10,000 feet if you've not gotten the chance to look through those episodes. So let's talk through it.
I'm kind of excited for the research group because, when you're going through the semesters, we do different things. So we're not just breaking down facts about, this human. We talk about him a lot. We talk about events that take place for him. But it's going to be cool to actually hear them kind of break down, that portion of his life. A little deeper than what we may have done during the semester.
Absolutely. Well, it's a super interesting kind of part of Moses' life. I mean, the guy's got, though it's the first 15 chapters, I believe, which basically ends, they're going to do they research the unit that starts where Moses kind of enters the story as a child. Pharaoh's killing babies and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Moses survives that. And then their section concludes with the people of Israel actually exiting Egypt. So the actual Exodus taking place, which I believe happens in Exodus chapter 15 or 16.
If you'd like more information on the Exodus, check out the Instagram. There's a 5-set reel regarding just this section.
Yes, exactly.
So 5 straight minutes.
Of reels
regarding exiting Egypt.
That's right. The exit. It's a big one. There's a bunch of important stuff, and it's symbolic too, which I love about kind of the story of Moses is that, and of the people of Israel, which is really the story. But ultimately God kind of saving his people, and there's symbolic things that even show towards Jesus, which is where a lot of people kind of draw the connection between the two, is that the people of Israel were lost. They were sheep without a shepherd. They were all these things. And then, God comes in and saves them, and he kind of builds this relationship with them. Then they screw it up again. And then it's this kind of circle of God stepping in again. And that's, the story really of us too. It's I kind of have that same story if I kind of look at it, through those lenses.
Yeah. My initial thought about just Moses, my takeaway, my footnote, if you will, or whatever, would be that Moses may be the most everyman man to ever live, which is kind of if you break it down just from, he was abandoned. Yep. He needed it, but he was still abandoned.
No choice, but absolutely,
He was a murderer.
Yep.
And later he's revered as one of the greatest leaders to ever live.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. And that's 3 huge chunks.
Sure.
All the things that happen in between and the interactions he has, the impact he has, it's just very eye-opening when you break it down into pieces.
Yeah.
Of his connection to just every dude who walks around.
Absolutely.
And how his life is, almost a mirror for a section for everybody.
Absolutely.
In some way.
I completely agree. Well, and you see Moses, more so than I think most of the characters in scripture, you see a lot more of Moses' life. So I feel like because so much of his life is recorded, you kind of get to know Moses as a person a little bit better than, say, like Jonah, who has like 6 chapters in all the Bible, and that's it. Like we feel like we know Jonah pretty well, but Moses, I think you're talking about a guy who's spread across books of the Bible, multiple books, and even like the Gospels, where you got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're the same story, though. And I mean, there's subtle differences between the 4 accounts, but it's 4 accounts of the same story. As to where Moses is, spread across 5 different books of the Bible. And that's one continuous story. Like they're not retelling the same story 4 times. That is the whole story, that's how much time it took to kind of play it out. And so when I was reading through, because I read through, before the semester, I read through Moses' entire story. So kind of all the way through his story, even into, reading into Hebrews and the Hall of Faith and those things where he's collected there as well. But I read through all of it, and man, you really get to know Moses. You really get to see. There's a lot of areas where Moses is flawed and he does stuff wrong. Like there's the murder, there's also, but even on top of that, in leadership, like there's a lot of leadership decisions that Moses makes that are questionable, but also could be, seen as even wrong or the wrong decision in that moment or whatever. And so you get to kind of see Moses react to that. Quick sidebar. So, my kids love Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man trilogy, the 3 that just came out. My kids are obsessed.
Tom Holland.
Yes, Tom Holland's Spider-Man. They don't like any of the other ones.
Yeah.
But that one. And they were hung on Iron Man for a while. And now it's all Spider-Man.
Yeah. Huh.
So we've been watching Spider-Man a ton. And one of the things that I love about the way that they told the story this time, because they've told Spider-Man like 10 times. Like it's been done.
It's been cartoons, comics,
it's all over the place. And it's great or whatever. But like the way that they told the story, Peter kind of goes from or Tom Holland's character kind of goes from this like innocent high school kid to, by the 3rd movie, he's like a superhero. He's only like a year older, but he's a superhero, and it's like there's all this weight and this pressure.
I was gonna say, like the expectations of one. Yeah,
exactly. And you can see it. Like his character physically is having trouble processing having to be what they want him to be.
Oh yeah.
And I think that Moses, when you look at his character, is very similar. Like he's very similar in the fact that I think Moses from the very beginning has this calling, I know I'm supposed to be doing something, because he pushes the Egyptian down and kills the Egyptian. You're like, why did he do that? Well, Moses is like, I'm supposed to be helping somehow. I don't know how, but I know I'm supposed to be helping. And so he's like, he wants to help somebody, he can't help himself. But at the same time, Moses really, throughout the story, you can see it with the people of Israel, he struggles with being that leader. And I think having to kind of step up, there's a lot of inadequacies, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety that is in Moses, which I think leads to some poor decisions along the way, leadership wise, because ultimately sending the spies into the promised land instead of just going where God said. When he did that, I think a lot of that came back to he wasn't sure to make that call. He wasn't confident enough in himself or in God to really make that call. And that's where I think that, Moses' character really shows that the wear and tear of leadership, if you will, which I think is cool.
Yeah, he doesn't even hide it from God, though. Like, he's pretty bold to God about the fact of, like, no, I'm not the one.
No,
like,
sure,
You got the wrong guy.
Yeah.
Like, you need to go find someone else. Like,
true.
Without saying that, essentially what he says.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, at the burning bush, he's very clear, which some of that could have been fueled by the fact that he did kill the Egyptian. He's like, and I think that story, in Spark, which was week 1, we kind of talked about that, talking about how, the burning bush experience, and every man has a burning bush experience at some point in your life, and those types of things. And God comes to Moses and he's like, this is what I want you to do. And he comes to him in a pretty profound way. I mean, he's in a bush it's on fire, but it's not consumed.
I would go back and check everything I've consumed the last 3 days.
Like if I were berries off that tree.
Somebody was having fun with my my coffee that morning. If I'm walking up on a bush that's on fire,
got it all going, right? You're like, I'm questioning everything now.
It's like, how did we get here?
Right, something's up. But I with this moment where God calls, Moses, and he's like, this is what I need you to do. And he's sending, and he's giving, and Moses starts out with, the excuses are around the Pharaoh. Well, the Pharaoh's not going to like me because I've killed an Egyptian. Which you're like, okay, it's understandable. It's probably true.
Yeah,
but,
probably.
The movies portray it. Most of the movies that you watch about Moses, they're like him and like the Prince of Egypt, like him and the Pharaoh are like best buds. And it's like, that's not how it was.
Yeah.
Like the Egyptians in that day held in very high esteem the law. And they were very like serious because they felt like that made them more intelligent than all the other, races and people that were around. And so they would have held that in very high esteem. It would have been a very big deal that he killed somebody.
Yeah.
That would have been that's not cool to
They're not
the Egyptians.
high-fiving on the way.
Yeah, they're not gonna be like, oh, it's okay, no big deal. You're Moses and we're all right.
Moses.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no, they would not have been a fan. And so that, so he starts out with that. Then he goes to the people of Israel. So he's like, well, the Pharaoh's gonna kill me, that's true.
Right.
Then he's like, well, the people of Israel won't listen to me, which again is coming off the same fuel, because remember, after he kills that Egyptian, he goes off and talks to the people of Israel about it, and they're like, are you gonna kill me too?
Yeah.
And he's like, yo, what the heck? I did it for you. And it's
Right.
like there's all this disagreement there. And then finally, after God like sifts through all these excuses, the final one is that Moses busts off with, well, I don't think I can do it. It's me now. So he's went through all his other excuses.
Yeah.
And so when he reached in the barrel, the last one was, I can't.
Which we talked about that on an earlier podcast. That's kind of like inside of every man. It's just that like, we put all these barriers and excuses of why we don't do whatever it is.
Absolutely.
In serving in ministry or in life in general. But, even going back to Moses kind of being that every dude's dude.
Yeah.
We see him having that same thought, that same conversation with himself here and with God even.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it comes up in other places in his story as well. There's other spots where Moses just has this doubt, and the burning bush is telling, because when Moses has this doubt in himself, Moses' words are, I can't do it.
Right.
But God reframes that question.
I don't talk good. They won't listen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he's saying I. But when God reframes the question, he says, who made your mouth? So now what God's doing to Moses is he's putting him on the spot, and he's saying, are you really doubting you? Are you actually doubting me? Like, who are you actually doubting? Because if you believe that God is who he says he is,
all while the bush is on fire.
Exactly. Oh, it's like blazing.
You're just like,
and Moses is like, yeah, I'm not sure, I'm just not convinced.
it's like, you set that thing on fire. It's not burning, but...
Yeah. But I mean, I'm just not sure that I'm like, all here or whatever. And then he's like throwing down his staff and it turns into a snake and stuff. And Moses
Which is
like,
my favorite part of the whole story.
Dude,
by far. I would lose it.
Messed up. Yep.
I'm still reading just because I'm slow. Playing catch up. So. But I was reading last night about it. And I guess I've heard that story a bunch over time.
Yeah.
But
it's a super popular story.
I thought it was awesome. Not awesome. Interesting. The Egyptian, the Pharaoh brings in all the magicians and they do the same thing.
Yep.
They make their staffs turn to snakes, which I was like, ooh.
Yeah.
That'd make you give the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, they're somehow able to copy it, which is interesting. It says they're able to copy it. They're able to do what he did, or at least some cheap imitation of what he did.
His snake, the version I was reading, NLT maybe?
Yep.
His snake consumes theirs, which I think is interesting too.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
My snake's bigger than yours. And like,
right. Well, and it may have even come down to that, that they were able to reproduce the miracle with a trick, which.
Give us an illusion.
It was an illusion of what it was, which again, we don't know exactly what the details of all that was, but at the same time, it's like, could there have been like an element of like, like dark magic or something?
Yeah.
Sure.
Something.
Absolutely, there could have been. At the same time, there could have been just sleight of hand, like it was a trick, and they tried to pass it off as a miracle, which is a whole nother podcast that we could probably talk about.
I think it's an interesting connection just back to that. Overall, just kind of, again, every person can relate to this story and this life he lived, in that, at that point, it was a literal miracle, literal magic, miracle, sleight of hand, whatever it was.
Right.
There were more snakes than one in that moment. And, we kind of run into that today just in our life of where it's like, oh, well, we're following this guy and he seems to have good intentions. He seems to be making the right choices. And then all of a sudden it's like, we do it with politicians.
Yeah.
We do it with celebrities. Somebody will give us like that one hope. Like there was that whole rash of like Christian celebrities that we ran through a while back. And then now it's like, do any of them go to church anymore? But, it was like a big deal for, I don't know, 6 months. You had Bieber and everybody who's all... It's like, oh, we're going to follow this guy now. And then like the next single drops and you're like,
the Christian celebrity scene is a little strange. It's like,
it's just kind of funny. That's not that Justin Bieber is making snakes appear on the ground.
Sure,
I was just using it as like we do that a lot still, or we still kind of buy into this like, sleight of hand's probably the best, or unintended deception maybe even.
Sure. Well, or even a cheap imitation.
Yeah.
It's like I was in LA and when I lived in Los Angeles, we'd go down Skid Row, and on Skid Row there'd be people selling Rolexes like all the time, and they were always fake, but like they're selling Rolexes, and it looked
close enough,
legit. Like they look legit. Like, you'd pick it up and you'd be like, man, if you held it next to a real Rolex, you'd be like, something's a little off, weight's a little off, they don't look right, blah, blah, blah. But honest to goodness, if you didn't know, and you just walked up and grabbed it and you just looked at it, you're like, it says Rolex, like it looks right, like it doesn't look fake. And, they'd be good imitations, or Gucci bags or something. They'd have, it's an imitation. It's not saying necessarily that, all it is just a knockoff of the original, which, so like, for instance, when it comes to our relationship with God, there's a lot of times where I think Christians in the general sense, sometimes we'll try to pass off a cheap imitation for what, a real relationship. So when it comes to like our relationship with God, there's times where for us, maybe we're not so close to God right now. Like, I'm not close, but on a Facebook post, or on an Instagram post, or on, in front of people, I may try to pass off, a cheap imitation of what a relationship with God would look like for the real thing.
Right.
Like, oh, it's the real thing. It's like, it's not. It's like, but at the same time, it looks legit. It's like, it sounds legit. And that's where, like, and I know this is kind of getting off topic, but like, when you look at like the Christian celebrity kind of movement and what that looks like, there's a lot of people that kind of jump behind these celebrities and stuff. And I think they can do that for a lot of different reasons. I think some of that could be legitimate support or whatever, but some of that also could be that these people are really, really famous. And like, that's just like kind of how our culture is. But the problem that you run into is that while, again, they're doing one song with Hillsong and it's great and it's exciting and everybody's like, wow, they're a big time Christian. And then their next single drops and it's like, I'm picking up, drugs, and I'm picking up my girls, and we're going to the club, and you're like, that's not exactly what I thought. Where was the Hillsong at? Like, how's that? Are they gonna put that on their EP, or are you just gonna leave that one off? Like, I don't know what you're supposed to do. And then and the sad part is that like the popular Christian movement doesn't even want to address it. It almost gives like this like, hey, everybody's got mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. It's like, okay, yeah, but you produced a song.
Yeah.
Like, that's not exactly just making like a little like, oh, whoops. Like, no, it's like, it's a whole song. Like, it was intentional, which is whatever. You do your thing, but at the same time, it's like, let's not pass this off as, you've had legitimate life change. Your life's completely different than what it was before, and then you're going to drop a song and it becomes something completely different.
Yeah.
I don't know about all that. So.
Yeah, it's a weird space for sure.
Yeah. Well, and it puts us in a strange spot when it comes to, I think for Moses, when you look at his story, there's no like specific spot where I think Moses' life completely changes that you can like pinpoint necessarily. But I do think throughout the story, you see him maturing. You see him kind of changing. Because even like, so last week, Ian spoke and the message was ashes, ashes. And it's the final message that Moses brings to the people of Israel, the final charge, if you will, to them. And you can hear the maturity in the story that he tells, the way that he tells it. He goes back through and he talks about Israel's journey, and he talks about where they've been and where they're going. And then he tells another story, and it doesn't make sense because they hadn't been where he's talking about yet. And so he's actually using the past to tell about the future at that point. And the people of Israel even, I think, would have been a little bit confused. Like, no, wait a second. What is he talking about? But it's like, well, he's talking about where you're going to be, is what Moses is talking about. And you're going to be faced with this decision, this choice to have to either choose God or not. You're going to have to make that decision. You're going to have to make it, on your own. Kind of the same charge that Joshua gives to the people of Israel in Joshua 24. It's like, choose this day whom you will serve. And Moses kind of gives that charge to Israel as his final kind of passing, which I think probably inspires Joshua as he goes into, because as soon as Moses dies, Joshua is the next leader that actually leads the people of Israel into the promised land. And when the book of Joshua opens up, it's a conversation between God and Joshua, and God is reaffirming Joshua, which you would have to imagine that Joshua's a semi-young guy because he would have had to have lived through these generations. He wasn't
100 and billion years old.
Exactly. And so Moses would have been their leader the entire time Joshua would have been alive, and probably the entire time Joshua's parents would have been alive.
Right.
Moses would have been the leader. And it's like, that guy just died, and now you have to take over.
You don't want to be the dude who follows the dude. That's about football coaches.
This guy was on the mountain, his face was glowing. He was so close to God, and I'm gonna be the one that's gonna go up there and now do that. It's like, yeah, right.
Did we have enough meetings before this?
Yeah, I know. Right? I don't think I've been through training. I'm not sure I can pass a background check. I'm gonna have to take a break. But yeah, no, it's really good.
Yeah, it's I thoroughly enjoyed learning about Moses.
Yeah.
For the last 4 weeks, it's been good, especially just the way the semester kind of lined out, like you're talking about. We had sparks. We talked about that initial kind of kick.
Yep.
For every man to get going, and then we kind of split, went two ways with blowing smoke. Where we're talking about kind of the leader piece a lot, and then kind of that impact that we have as the leader moving forward, and then wrapping it up last week with that final conversation that we're having with Moses. Oh, not funny because someone passed away, but
nope.
It was a fact that came. We talked actually in that message about the 120 years. That's the maximum. Yeah. And the oldest living person passed away.
Yep.
At 119 in some days, recently.
Yep.
I saw that. I was like, huh.
Yeah. That's what God says. Like Genesis 6, I want to say God says, he's like, I'm done dealing with humans this long. I'm going to cut their life to 120 years. 120 is all you're going to get. It's like, man, you look at Moses, and it's like, like we say, we walk through this story, and it's huge. I mean, there's so much to it when you're looking at Exodus, and then all the way through with the law and all these different things, which it's also interesting.
The law gets trippy.
Yeah, it is tricky, and it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy big, and it's crazy wild, and it's all these things. Which,
the things that you're like, oof.
Yeah, it's brutal in some areas. God's very serious, and which is interesting because Moses is God's instrument to communicate the law to people, which was the only way for someone to actually experience salvation. So the only way for someone in the Old Testament, prior to Jesus, the only way in the Old Testament for someone to enter into a relationship with God and not have to endure hell would be to abide by that law without flaw from start to finish in their life, which when you look at the law, you're like, there's no way. There's no chance. Which really is what the law was designed to do. It was designed to be a mirror to show us how broken we really are.
Right.
Not for the point of just scaring the snotty and be like, oh, you stink. Sorry. You didn't make the team.
I mean, the punishments in the law are brutal.
Absolutely.
The whole thing is brutal.
Yeah, it's brutal.
I wonder if this is maybe my ignorance, but I wonder if that's because at that time, we're still talking about really early, like in history of humanity at this point. So I wonder if it's we don't have salvation in the sense that we have it today post Jesus dying for us. And I wonder if it's just the humans being humans after this sin is released on the world, if this is kind of coming to a culmination of these people are bad. This is when your kid finally breaks the last straw and you're just like, grounded till you leave. At 19, you can get out of your room. Right. You reach that point where you just want to lose it. Yeah. And I wonder, not that God's throwing a fit here, but it's just he's being that dad that's like, all right, that's it. We're done. Go sit down.
Well, and I think when it comes to the law, I think that's just how brutal the standard is. It's like, hey, look, that's how hard it really is to be good enough. That's how difficult, and that's the.
Or maybe it's how soft we become now.
No, sure.
Yeah, where we look at that now, we're like, what? Like,
right.
we're not cutting off hands.
No, absolutely. Well, and I think that we have definitely evolved punishment wise in modern society and culture with the ability for punishment to happen. Because like even with Moses, when you look at when he takes over for the people of Israel, his father-in-law Jethro, who he meets he's a cool guy. He meets him in the wilderness, before he takes over the people of Israel, before he leaves or helps them to exit out of Egypt. He meets Jethro, marries his daughter. I think he actually marries two of his daughters, but anyway, he marries one of his daughters for sure. And then when they're coming out of Egypt, Jethro's still with them, which I think is cool. I think it's cool that Jethro didn't have to go with them, but he did. And then Jethro says to Moses, he says, hey, you've got to appoint some judges for other people to be able to, for them to be able to handle some stuff for you, because you're not going to be able to handle all this. I think that there was no rule of law. There was no government. God is kind of establishing those things for the people of Israel, while at the same time providing a law that could be the key to that. Well, it is the only key to a perfect relationship and what that kind of look like.
And at that moment in the story, the Bible kind of sets up like a judicial system.
Absolutely.
Very similar to what we have now, even,
absolutely.
Where it's like, all right, you've got these guys. You're in charge of 50, 100, and 150.
Exactly.
5 and 10.
Yeah,
I think it's
like
supposed to be like that. And then they answer to you, and then you answer to me, and then I answer to God.
Yeah,
almost.
exactly.
And then if you don't know the answer, they come to me.
Bring it up. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of interesting the way it's set up there. Then that's like, we just have taken that as kind of the way that we do law. The way that, like, if you were running a business, it's like there's those lines of managers, and it's like, all right, well, that problem, it can be handled by you.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't handle it? All right, this next level's got it. Or this next level's got it. If you pass that level, you probably got fired. But
right. Well, when Jethro drops that wisdom, I mean, it's wisdom. I think it's wisdom for the ages. Like it's a very wise, piece of instruction that Jethro lends to Moses in this time, which some of that again goes back to those same insecurities I think that Moses had in the beginning, about his leadership, about his ability, because once you stop doubting yourself, or you put yourself in a spot where you can't afford to doubt yourself, there are a lot of times where you'll start doubting others. And so when I can't do it to me, I'll project it onto someone else. Or if someone makes me feel like that, if someone makes me feel inadequate, then I may project onto them that they're inadequate too. And it's like, well, I can't do it, but you can't do it either. And it's like, well, that's not good leadership. And so when Jethro suggests that to Moses, I truly believe it's great. It's great, like a wisdom piece, but it's also really the only way that it could be effective. It's like, it's the only way that the people of Israel are going to be able to move on. And this group of people are going to be managed well, because Moses is bottlenecking, the system with his, with his stuff. So,
and that was part of my conversation message.
Sure.
Was this moment, and I took it in a way of like, this is the point of where Moses is kind of charged with that leadership as you are the leader of these people. This is your role. He brings on men of his group and charges them as being the leader. And it's kind of that point where we realize that, us as men, as point men, have a charge from God to be the leaders of the church, our community, our families. And I think it's important that we don't let that slide at times. And this is a good point in the story where we kind of break that down and, get that for the first time, it feels.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Well, I think that's where we wrap up that episode. We are right on time to be able to wrap that up. So, guys, it's been a blast talking through Moses. We're going to bring on that research team, and then Ian's message will drop too. So be watching for that. You may have already seen it.
All 4 weeks will be up, and go back and check them out.
Be rocking and rolling.
Sweet.
All right, guys. Take it easy.